communities not even want to seek out the basic sort of inadequate care that they may be able to access. So yeah, it's not good. And again, I think that what we saw in Texas with this SB4 bill was, I think you're seeing these so-called sanctuary cities laws have been proposed in Texas every session, but there previously had been within the Republican Party their own check on that sort of thing, understanding what the future of Texas looks like, right? The Republicans in Texas don't want to look like sort of, racist and anti-immigrant, but they, like the rest of the country, I think this last year have really gone far, far to the right and are really catering to, the most extreme, insidious parts of their base. I like to think it's like a last gasp, before I think they see the writing on the wall. And then so maybe they're scared and they're trying to do everything they can. I mean, it makes sense. They're trying to suppress the vote. They're trying to make communities scared. They're trying to make people stay home. But again, I think there's lots of amazing work being done on the ground in these communities and there's legal challenges obviously happening as well.
So you guys have some primary elections coming up very soon.
Yes.
Early voting starts in a week, so very quickly coming up. What are the races that you're really excited about?
So we're obviously really excited about Beto and that statewide Senate election. But honestly, what really excites me the most is the fact that we're seeing more competitive congressional races than we've ever seen. We're seeing more competitive Texas legislature races. And again, like I was just outlining, like that is where policy is made that really ruins people's lives. And so the ability to pick up seats not only in Congress, which is going to be sort of the opposition to Trump, but also here in our state where we're going to need good progressives fighting the fight next legislative session. I'm super excited by the opportunity to pick up these seats. I think that like conservatively, I'm thinking, I mean, we're tracking a bunch of stuff, but 20 seats congressionally and in the Texas House and Senate is what we're looking at. So I'm excited about that. I think that has the opportunity not only to like energize our base, and these are also races that are in like what's called like the Texas Triangle. So it's Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, San Antonio. So they're in these major metro and urban adjacent districts where we're seeing just a lot of voter engagement and mobilization and interest. And there's just a ton of candidates running in all these races, which is also very exciting, running for the nomination. So I'm very excited by that. And hopefully those are the people that will be determining the future of our state and shaping it into something that isn't so apocalyptic sounding.
Speaking of shaping the future and sort of literally shaping, do you think that if you can flip a bunch of those seats in the state House and state Senate, that there is a chance that there could be a change to the gerrymandered districts?
I hope so. I think that we also have a Supreme Court case pending on that front that could be huge for Texas, obviously. The intentionally racially discriminating in the maps. That was for Congress and the House maps. It didn't include the Senate map. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's promising. I mean, I think that it's hard to know if we're going to hit the threshold that we need to be the majority to draw those maps, obviously, because that is so important and sort of charting out quite literally the future of what the state looks like electorally. I am hopeful that is the case. Yes, absolutely.
I have heard some people who work in progressive politics in states that are considered more red on the national level complain that they feel that the Democratic Party sort of hasn't invested very heavily in their state races or hasn't really paid a lot of attention to them. Do you feel like that has been the case in the past, and do you feel like you've seen that changing at all recently?
Yeah, so I mean, Texas has been low priority for national Democrats. They fundraise in Texas, but a lot of that money goes out of state because it's historically seen as unwinnable, I guess. But I think that we're starting to see, I mean, for these congressional races, for instance, in previous cycles, we've had one competitive congressional seat, CD23, which is the Will Hurd seat now, but it's kind of ping-ponged back and forth. Now we're seeing like the DCCC, for instance, coming in and investing in at least 4 races, congressional races in Texas. I think that also what we saw in 2016 is Texas was one of the only, I think it's like 4 states that like we did better numerically. So we're like going in the right direction. So I definitely think that with that comes more national investment, and we hope so. But in terms of investing in these sort of down ballot, like below congressional seats, I don't think that we're seeing that much. And Beto is really running a sort of independent campaign, I would say, which I think is awesome. And I think that it's something different that we need to see. And it's sort of a new sort of, he's doing it differently than other people have in the past, run a statewide campaign on the Democratic side. So that will be exciting to see sort of how that plays out.
All right. Is there anything else that you think people would find surprising or interesting or exciting about Texas politics?
Yeah, I don't know. So I think that this year, I think people should be excited about Texas. I think that the interest in running for office in Texas, particularly like after we saw what happened in Virginia and in Alabama and like all of these places that are like people are getting surprised by candidates that you maybe didn't think had a shot and they're winning. I think that trickles down, and I think that sort of excitement is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You want sort of that excitement to permeate every part of elections. And so I think that we're in this sort of, we are seeing more people run for office at every level than we ever have on the Democratic side of things in Texas. So that's very exciting. That's where we are right now. And then as we get out of this primary season, because we do have a super early primary in Texas, I'm excited to see sort of how that excitement and engagement carries through the general, which hopefully will be amazing.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to us, and thank you for all the good work you're doing at Progress Texas.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Hello, everybody. It's Kelly. In this segment, I am thrilled to have with me Ivy Lee, who is in Texas drinking some bourbon. Hello, Ivy.
Hi, Kelly.
So, Ivy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure, I'd love to. I'm a native-born Texan. I was born in Houston. I was raised in Dallas. I lived in Georgia for about 11 years, where I took on the Tea Party a few times and won every time. But I ran back here to Austin, Texas to raise my family just as quick as I could. And I am the most conservative member of the board of Indivisible Austin, which is not saying much. It's not hard to be the most conservative member of this group of folks. And I speak 3 of the most widely spoken languages in the state of Texas. The first is English is number 1, Spanish is number 2, and 3 is Vietnamese.
What does it mean to be the most conservative member? So when I think about Indivisible, I'm in Indivisible Chicago, and there's nobody even approaching conservative in Indivisible Chicago. So what does Indivisible Austin look like, and what do you mean when you say most conservative member?
Well, as you may have noticed, the meaning of conservative has changed over time.
Yes.
So in Texas, conservatism is really fractured idea right now. For example, you probably are familiar with the Texas spirit of individualism, of local control, small government, right? Mm-hmm. Well, right now, there's kind of there's a big disagreement within the Republican Party here in Texas, with people at the state level wanting to consolidate power at the state, saying that it's the states like Texas that grant the federal government the powers that it has and grants the smaller local governments like school districts and tax districts the powers that they have. So obviously, a lot of conservatives that are doing their civic duty at the local level disagree with that. So in a place like Austin, Texas, which is a local government, but it is widely known as one of the most liberal cities in the state of Texas, these things start to conflict with each other. So Uber, for example, Uber and Lyft did a big fight down here, tried to make an example out of the city of Austin, Texas, because it is a relatively young city and it is very friendly to tech companies. So they tried to get a law passed about dictating what requirements their rideshare drivers would or would not have to do, and overturning a local ordinance that was being proposed. And they blew an insane amount of money. I think something to the tune of like $8 million. It's the most money that had ever been spent at a local referendum here in Austin, Texas, ever, by far, by probably, tenfold or more. And they lost big time. So then they went to the state to send their lobbyists to the state and ended up passing where it successfully passed a law where the state can overturn local ordinances like that, which is not something that all Republicans agree with, all conservatives agree with, right? So to be the most conservative member of Indivisible Austin, I'm going to be more hesitant about, we range from libertarian to just straight up socialist, like bordering on communist. We're just a really diverse group. And so there's some of our libertarians are some of our hardest workers. They are, we have a strong libertarian element in some of our districts they just show up. They show up and they are just a pain in the neck in their Republican districts. And then we have, people who are small business owners who or entrepreneurs who want to have healthcare, but maybe are more concerned about some of the more onerous things that progressives, want to pass. And it's kind of that friction between being, I guess really kind of what it comes down to is I am a pretty, what you would consider a classical Texas conservative, but I'm a minority. So whereas I believe in the Constitution and all these things, maybe many of my white counterparts, will have experienced the Bill of Rights differently than I experienced it. They may say, oh, well, we want to go back to a time where the government was smaller. And I will probably say, I want to go forward to the time where the government is doing it, is right sized. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we are so far from that today, right, where we are in, Trump's America, I'm going to be allied with people from all parts of, the political spectrum, in this one agenda to defend our democracy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting thing for those of us in the Midwest to think about because, here at least, especially in a place like Chicago, Indivisible is all super progressives. The people that you describe as, close to communists, like that's a lot of the people that are in a
Sure.
place like Indivisible Chicago. And so thinking about sort of more widely what the resistance to Trump and the Trump administration can look like and the resistance to the Tea Party can look like, I think is really useful and valuable to think about.
Yeah, the conservative base in Texas is so big and so diverse. There is just no way that they can all agree with each other. And at the federal level, you can see that, right? If they weren't so fractured and they weren't so diverse, and they've got power in both houses and, the White House, right? If they weren't so fractured, they would be getting a lot more done than they are.
Mm-hmm. And so, one of the other things that I think is important for people to think about when they're thinking about Texas is that a lot of the people, even those with whom we might align politically, are going to have different opinions about things like guns. And so can you talk a little bit about the gun culture in Texas?
Yeah, that's also something about Indivisible Austin. Jason, founding member of Indivisible Chicago, he was down recently, and he was surprised to find out that several of us go shooting together. I mean, not a lot of us, but maybe 2 or 3 out of 12 of us, go shooting together. Guns are, I think, even the most staunch Democrats, that represent, say, Texas that we send to D.C., or staunch Democrats that are in leadership positions in our state legislature are very comfortable with guns. It's not really an issue people here tend to focus on, because if we only focused on that, we really wouldn't be able to get much else done, I don't think.
Do you think that there is room for dialogue about common sense gun laws and gun safety that does not mean getting rid of everybody's guns, taking them away, but, could be ways that we could move forward on that issue in ways that everybody could be, maybe not completely satisfied, but a little bit happier than they are now about, the way that the gun culture is in this country?
I absolutely think that there is room to improve. But I think kind of the problem is when we talk crossways at each other, right? I think the fact that we don't actually talk to each other, I think it's very rare in places outside of Texas and places, and certainly rare in Austin for somebody who is completely anti-gun